Good evening, everyone. I'm Dwayne Johnson Cochran in an undisclosed location, chair of the genre committee. I'm here with Kelly Jo Brick, my vice chair, and we are going to present tonight a very, very interesting panel discussion on how it was done, how they did it. And we're very excited about this panel. We're a really, really great group of people. And before we get started, I'd like Kelly Jo to give us some updates on our committee.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming out. We want to invite you to join us at the next Genre Committee meeting coming up on Tuesday, December 2nd. The Genre Committee celebrates and champions all things genre, from sci-fi and horror to fantasy, mystery, rom-coms, historical, and beyond. So please come join us. We have an exciting guest coming up for our meeting in December. We would love to have you there. A few quick thank yous. First to Greg Mitchell, our guild liaison. He does so much incredible work behind the scenes to help bring these events together and just make us all look great. We really appreciate everything he does. Also, thank you to our panelists for taking time out of your schedule to join us and also to share all your experiences with us. We really appreciate that. And then to Sam Christopher for bringing this idea for this twist panel to the genre committee and leading the way on it, and also to the subcommittee who helped bring this all together. So back to you, Dwayne.
Okay, so without any further ado, we have quite a few people coming into our to the chat. I mean to the oh, a lot of participants, 103. That's great. So without any further ado, we're going to bring it to Sam Christopher. She's going to be hosting the event today, and take it away.
Everyone, yeah, I just wanted to thank Dwayne and Kelly Jo real quick before we got started. As Kelly Jo said, the Genre Committee is a great place that celebrates all sorts of genres, and if you are interested in getting more involved in the Guild, it's a really great place to start. It's very friendly and welcoming, and I've really enjoyed being in it in my time in the Guild, So yeah, we're gonna have a great discussion tonight. After the panelists introduce themselves, we'll talk for about an hour. We're gonna talk about all sorts of things related to twists, how to write them, how to pitch them, how to keep them from leaking, and I think even, are they always necessary? So after we've been talking for about an hour, we'll take questions from the audience. So if you have questions, please submit them through the Q&A function, and then those will get asked towards the end. I will say we are probably going to talk some spoilers just by nature of this conversation. So if there's anything you're really dying not to know about, you might want to keep your finger on the volume control for yourself. So my name is Sam Christopher. I wrote on the Blacklist on NBC, and it was a really twisty show. It had a rule that every Act 3 out had to end on a twist. We always had to change the nature of the case. We called it it's not an X, it's a Y, and our best one was it's not a virus, it's a virus. It's not a illness, it's a computer virus. I'm sure we'll dig into that some more as we talk. And yeah, I'm interested to hear about how it's been done on other shows and movies. So I was hoping the panel could introduce themselves. Love to hear things you've worked on, what your experience is, and a favorite twist that you've seen, either an all-time favorite or maybe something recently you haven't been able to get out of your head, just something that really blew your mind. So maybe David, can we start with you?
David Weddle. I'm a writing partner with Bradley Thompson. We've been in the business we've been partners for 30 years in television. We worked on Battlestar Galactica, The Strain. We're currently working on For All Mankind, starting our 6th season. We also worked on CSI, and we worked on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So yes, we worked on shows where twists were very important and ones where they're less so important, and run the gamut through, back and forth through that spectrum. So I look forward to talking with everyone about that.
Mm-hmm. And do you have an all-time favorite twist?
You mean not my work, but in
things that you've seen, yeah.
In things that I've seen. Well, I have a point of view. I like twists that come out of character. So I like twists that reveal character. So to me, it's not an exterior thing. Those are not the twists I like. I like twists that come from character. So I'll just give you a couple of quick ones. In Election, where Matthew Broderick seems to be this straight-laced, by the book teacher. And his friend starts telling him about the affair he's having with a young student. And he's like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear the details. He's all righteous about it. And then a little bit later, he goes down in his basement and we find out that he has a porn fetish and starts fantasizing about the very same student. And all of a sudden, Matthew Broderick is not the character who I thought he was. He's a totally different character than I thought. And that's something that I love. Another one to go back into 60s cinema would be The Swimmer with Burt Lancaster, where he starts out, he's beatific, he's an Adonis. He's going to swim across the pools in his county to get home. And he seems to have it all. But as he goes from pool to pool, which these are all his neighbors and people he knows, we gradually see people looking at him askance, people looking at him skeptically, and we start to realize all is not what it seems with him. And by the end, what we learn is he lost his job a couple months ago, and he lost his house, and his family left him. In the end, he's making a journey back to his house that has been foreclosed on, and the windows are broken, and he's on his knees crying. And what we saw in the beginning was really an attempt to escape his inner reality. And so, oh my God, this is not the character I met in the opening scene of the movie. And we've peeled the onion. So those are just a couple examples of favorite twists of mine.
Great. Brad?
Well, you're asking me right after David. So, pretty much everything that he did, I did, and he did. So the partnership stuff, I don't really have to mention other than, so we'll go right to twists. And I don't really have a whole bunch of them because we also are on the same page. I don't like to do twists for the sake of twists. Wow, they'll never see this coming. And, it's, well, that's because his DNA is actually a chimera, which we've never heard of and we haven't set up. But boy, that's out of nowhere. But again, character twists I like, and I like to call them more surprises, where I didn't know you were going to do that. One of my favorite ones was in Battlestar, which we didn't happen to write. This one was one that Ron Moore did, which is, okay, we're just going to jump for a year. And we're going to go from one place to a year later, and we're not going to explain it. We're not going to do anything about it. We're just there. But that came out of, there was nothing really to tell till you got there, and then I can backfill all of that. But the interesting part was that we were there. Another one was like in Hard Day's Night, where I'm looking at a John Lennon scene with this woman coming down the stairway, and she hasn't a clue who he is. And they're having this whole actually surreal conversation about who he is, who she is. And neither of them know anything about one another, but pretending they do. And at the end of it, John just comes out of it going, it's like, she looks more like him than I do. And that surprises me, and that I find twist worthy.
Mm-hmm.
And we got a bunch of other guys to talk too, so I want to hear what they like.
Yeah. All right. Katie, I see you next on my grid.
Sure. Hi, I'm Katie French. I'm currently a writer on the TV show Paradise on Hulu. I've worked on a show called Station 11 before that. I was involved with Mr. Robot. And let's see. I mean, the first twist that pops into my mind when you say all-time favorite twists is probably Kaiser Soze, which is, like a classic kind of gotcha. But I think my favorite, to David and Bradley's point, character twist that I always come back to, especially when I'm thinking about pilots, is the end of the pilot of Mad Men, which is not necessarily a twist, but we've met this super cool ad exec guy, Don Draper. He's got, this artsy girl that he's sleeping with. He smokes indoors, it's all this cool stuff. And then we see him go home to a wife and kid. And I always think about that just in terms of when we're meeting a character for the very first time, kind of a lot of what David was saying. the order of information can provide that surprise in a way that lights up that internal charge point that's going to carry the show through, or carry an arc through, or just hook me into it. So I think about that a lot. Yeah.
John?
Okay. My name is John Brancato. I've written and co-written a bunch of movies over the years. My favorite is, speaking of twists, a movie called The Game from the mid-90s. Also worked on The Net and a couple of Terminator movies, which had twists. Although they also had sabotage twists that the producers destroyed. But that's another story. Yeah, I mean, I've always loved the feeling of free fall, that a movie can suddenly pull the rug out from under you and cause you something like at least a hint of the sensation of revelation. That suddenly nothing that you thought was true is true, and all of a sudden the world opens up, and it's like it's a new color that you've never seen before. And that from childhood, when I would see a movie like Psycho with the sudden shock of the murder, there would be moments like that that just like blow your mind. And that when I started writing movies, way too many years ago, I've been in the guild since the mid 80s. What I was always after was something like that, and not a cheap twist, but a twist that suddenly feels like the right thing. And it was always the right thing, but you never saw it coming. And suddenly you're awake in a new way. So twists, love them, lived on them, eat them. They were great.
All right, and Jeffrey?
Hi, I'm Jeff Bell. Written in television. I started with the X-Files for a few years, did Angel and Alias and Spartacus, and last 7 was with Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I don't think so. We don't think so much as twist as turns and reveals. My cohort here have all done like amazing versions of that on their shows. 2 that come to mind for me is Vertigo, where the story just keeps turning, and she's dead, then she's not dead, then she's playing him, and then all the way to the end. I won't reveal the end in case you haven't seen the end, but beautiful turns through that. And then recently, Parasite. You're halfway through Parasite and you think it's one kind of movie, then suddenly there's a door to the basement. It becomes a whole different. I mean, that's still, to me, one of the great moments, and the back half of that movie just continues to turn and reveal all the way to the very end. So I think that's spectacular that way. But my cohort here have all done really great turns and reveals themselves. So that's cool. It's fun to be here with them.
Yeah, this is a great group. Yeah, so just to talk big picture, I think we've touched on this a little bit. We've talked about character, but like, what to you makes a twist good? What a twist needs in order to feel satisfying? And anyone can answer. It's a big picture question.
I mean, when it feels like it's earned, when it's something that suddenly, makes sense, that it works on a character level. I mean, when I was thinking about writing the game in the first place and had the idea for it, I mean, to me, it was always about a character who's waking up. It's basically a Scrooge story, ultimately, but that the twist is a waking up into reality, a waking up into a more full version of life. I mean, it's sort of the classic, like Philadelphia story and 4 trillion other stories that talk about becoming real. And that's sort of what it was. It's a Velveteen Rabbit story, but a twist that has that psychological dimension that's somehow, warm on some level, that's human. That's, that's the best kind that I'm always hoping to get. And even cheap twists, I like those too. It just, yeah. I like them. I've always enjoyed them. It's one of the great joys of movies is that sudden feeling of, oh, I mean, really a light bulb going on that wasn't there before. But
I'll talk about I like that your term, John, about earned twists, because I'll quote another or cite another Alexander Payne movie, which is about Schmidt, which is a movie that Brad got me to watch, my co-writer. And though I probably would have watched it eventually. The movie, there's a great twist at the end that's incredibly powerful, but it's earned. Jack Nicholson plays this accountant who's retired, and immediately, the guy takes over for him, doesn't want his advice on how to run the department, throws all his notes out. He finds out his wife, who dies of a heart attack, was having an affair with his best friend. He goes across country, makes a fool of himself, thinking a woman is interested in him when she's not. He goes to see his daughter, who's going to marry a guy he doesn't admire. And all the way through this, I forget the mechanism. He starts writing to he gets sponsors a child to save the children, and he's writing letters to this young boy in Africa, not ever expecting to hear from him. And the letters become like diary entries, and it's about the desolated state of his life and how his life seems to have added up to nothing. Nothing redeeming in it at all. And what did it all mean? At the very end, he comes back home, and there's a letter waiting for him, and it's from the little boy in Africa, who is saying how much his letters have meant to him and how they changed and affected his life. And I think the last image is on Jack Nicholson's face with tears in his eyes, and he's suddenly redeemed. But that has been earned all the way through the movie because the letters are being written. You just don't expect. While you're watching it, you think this is just a way to get his inner thoughts out on the screen so we know what he's thinking and feeling. But in fact, there's this amazing payoff at the end of the movie that's so spiritually uplifting, and it's completely earned. It's not out of nowhere. It's not something that somebody pulled in out of a meeting with development executives. It's and so that's a beautiful, beautiful twist, I think.
Any other thoughts on what makes one good?
Well, it's emotional. It's not a move. I mean, a lot of rooms, you talk about that a lot. It has to be emotional. And you'll hear people pitch things all the time in the room, and it's like, that's cool. It's like, but it's a move, And so it has to have an emotional meaning. And that's sort of the filter, I think everything we do has to, at its base, move you somehow emotionally. And on Battlestar, I mean, when you find out that a person isn't a person but a Cylon, there were a couple of really soul-crushing ones, I mean, really not no, my God, no. And the character had the same reveal that I did because the character didn't know that they were a Cylon, and it was spectacularly painful. And I've been on a lot of shows where people really enjoy applying pain to characters to make them interesting. It's like a bland character, and they lose someone, something bad happens. The emotional equivalent of giving them a scar across their face. But it's an emotional thing that makes them deeper. And so you're always looking for a way to make a person more interesting. And so the emotional turns are always the best.
Well, there's one in Battlestar that Brad and I wrote that episode, and it was a very difficult one to write, but related to what you're just saying, Jeffrey, which is Colonel Ty tells Adama he's a Cylon. And so we had to write this. And that came initially from a kind of external place. We had final 5 Cylons in the fleet, and when are we going to reveal them? Who are they? And at first, for Brad and I, felt very external, and I didn't like it. And then we had to write this episode. And I think one of the things that makes that scene so incredible is that these guys have been friends for years and years, and Adama's strength has been Ty, his best friend, who he can rely on, who helps him pull the fleet from the edge of disaster over and over again. And so his loyalty to Ty, who fucks up a lot, but his loyalty is Adama's strength. But when Ty tells him he's a Cylon, that strength becomes a weakness. And Adama just totally comes apart which I
Yeah.
think is not what you expect. Hopefully as a viewer, you think, oh, he's going to airlock him. He's going to be, he's going to be really severe. That part's kind of predictable. But what happens is Adama, first of all, doesn't want to believe it, tries to make excuses for his friend. Then when he realizes it, he totally crumbles and falls on the floor crying and tells his son, I can't airlock him. You'll have to do it. And like, so the emotional pain, finding that in that relationship is, I think, what made that twist so powerful. Taking it beyond like, oh, wow, Tyza's Cylon, I didn't see that coming. And that's always what makes these things work, I think.
That's actually the character I think you could tell I was talking about. And the other piece of that then is it's not just the turn for the turn's sake, but how it affects every domino down the road. And how can you, what's the surprising way people react to that?
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to praise that storyline more. So please jump in.
Thank you so much. There's a certain inevitability to it when you look back at it that I love in the twists. And there was one early in the Tony Graffia did where we had written that, okay, we found out the assassin was, that Sharon was a Cylon, and now we're going to have to do something about that. And I think it was this, but Tony Graffia was writing this thing. We were going to take her out. We're going to torture her. We're going to get information from her. And that's the way the show was broken. And she's reading this and writing this in the middle of the night and calls up David and says, David, you're better off to tell the story than I am. But it was like, I just see this being, somebody's going to Jack Ruby this person, just waste him. And of course that upset everything downstream and none of us saw it coming. So, but it wasn't, there was an inevitability to it that this would happen. But
and she picked a guy, Tyrell was in love with Boomer and Callie was in love with Tyrell, though he didn't know it. And she's the one that shot Boomer because she could not stand that Boomer fooled the man that she secretly loved so much. And then what makes Ron Moore a great showrunner is Tony asked Brad and I just feel like I want to do this. Should I call Ron up and ask him if I can do this? And we said, no, just do it, because we'd learned already that he likes that. And so she did, and Ron Moore loved it. And Ron Moore used to say to writers that he let go from Battlestar, I'm letting you go because you never surprised me. He liked to be surprised in drafts, not just in the room, but in drafts, and he encouraged it. But I think the surprises had to come from an organic place, not from a manufactured twist for twist sake place.
Yeah, well, I mean, it seems like that's the really tough needle to thread with a twist, is that you want it to feel inevitable after it happens, but you still want it to be surprising. And it seems like the internet has sort of complicated this, because you're sort of pitting in some ways the writer's room against the collective power of humanity. And I was just wondering, what are some ways that you try to balance this surprise but inevitability? And do you care about whether or not the internet is going to guess a twist that you have coming?
Well, I had the internet actually destroy a movie that I wrote, which it was the fourth Terminator film, which I don't know if anybody's bothered to see it. It's not a very good film, finally, but it starts with a character who's essentially a cyborg of a sort, human brain inside a chassis, and eventually he comes out into the post-apocalyptic nightmare. At the same time, John Connor is like failing in his job, not really understanding how he's supposed to defeat Skynet. He's just sort of confused and flailing. And ultimately, this other character is able to plug into Skynet and gets extremely damaged at one point. John Connor is like almost killed and is dying. And they decide, since John Connor already has this rep and is a face that people have come to recognize in the underground, they're going to make up this cybernetic organism to look like John Connor, who's dying. And so he's actually becomes the real John Connor, and it's his ability to connect to the Skynet and destroy it that finally explains how he's able to defeat the machines. So anyway, that was like the conceit of the whole movie. And then apparently it leaked somewhere on the internet, and like 16 fanboys got upset. And then the director chickened out and changed the ending, which thankfully I wasn't having to write. Somebody else had to come in and butcher a bad ending. But yes, it's a tough thing in the internet age. If your script gets out and 6 people say they don't like it, then all of a sudden the studio panics. And then I don't know. It's a grim thing. Ideally, it's a twist that will sustain, even if, the world knows about it in advance. Sometimes knowing about it in advance, you can watch a movie a second time and be appreciating it all the more when you know the twists and know what's coming and understand how it's working. And, when it does work, it's always satisfying.
In terms of keeping, it's in terms of keeping it secret, we ran into that also on Galactica when we killed off, spoiler, Starbuck. And they went to extremes, they weren't going to put her name on the next episodes. They told the cast she was leaving, and it kind of blew up on us in the sense that the cast pretty much rebelled. They were giving her a big party to say goodbye. They were sending us nasty notes saying this is the stupidest thing you've ever done. And we kind of just had to go back off and say, no, guys, we're really not killing her. But but in terms of, there, as Ron pointed out again a long time ago, it was, you choose to be spoiled if, there's going to be guys out there that are going to do this. And as an audience, if you want to be spoiled, okay, fine. If you don't, keep your eyes and ears shut when somebody starts talking.
We had a huge problem on the Blacklist of in COVID finding the Vimeo rehearsal or audition tapes for people, and they'd watch an audition tape for someone who we didn't even have any chance of hiring. They'd be like, "Oh, this character sounds so bad." It's like, but you sought out anyway, yeah. The internet has really.
I think it's a mistake to put too much, value in internet traffic and what they have to say. And I've actually, on some shows, when showrunners start to get into, this is what they're saying in the chat rooms. I said, we should not be writing for the people in the chat rooms or on the blogs because they are not the majority of the audience by any stretch of the matter. They have a big megaphone, but they're not the main audience. And I learned this because we started on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, which already had chat rooms and stuff like that. And Ira Bear, who ran the show, would just ignore that and say, don't pay any attention, because most people, they're not the majority of your audience. They're not going and reading all of that stuff and looking for spoilers. And so I'm against worrying about it at all myself.
Jeff, you worked on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which had sort of the tie-ins with the movies, and it seems like you had a lot indebted to what was a spoiler coming up in a movie, or would a movie spoil something you're doing? What was that like?
Well, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was a TV show that Bob Iger decided the world needed, and the Marvel movie people really didn't want us to exist. So they were like, sure, go ahead. You just can't have any of our characters or any of our props. And so good luck. And so we were working on the first season, and what we knew that nobody else knew was in the Winter Soldier that was coming up, they were going to reveal that Hydra was in charge of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., that Nazis were running the thing. And so we talked about the H word. We would not use the H word anywhere on the board. We would find other things for that in case that happened. And we got a lot of criticism early on because we had no uber bad guy. And it was because we weren't allowed to have an uber bad guy. And we had a character named Ward, who was the Boy Scout. And we also brought in Bill Paxton, who was fantastic, came in, played with us, one of the last things he did before he passed. And we timed it so that the movie came out on a Friday, and then we aired on a Tuesday, and we revealed that Bill Paxton's Shield character was actually part of Hydra. And we thought that was pretty cool. But then at the very end of the episode, when he leaves with Ward, Ward turns around and shoots this person in the head. And we reveal that one of our core characters is actually part of Hydra. And people were really interested in our show. But and it was earned. We'd done everything to set him up and going forward. But part of the reason it worked was we had this big, bright, shiny light in Bill Paxton. And I mean, we talk about twists and turns and reveals, you know, a lot what you're talking about is misdirection. I've done I've been an amateur magician since I was a kid, and I've always loved misdirection. And so we had Bill Paxton standing here and making Ward go against his will, and everybody like, oh, Bill Paxton's the bad guy. And then you turn and reveal that Ward was also a villain. It worked really well, and suddenly people were interested. But we didn't tell the cast. We actually didn't put out the pages. We put out fake pages. We then brought the cast into a trailer and had them read the pages for the first time together. And it really affected the dynamics of the team, as you could expect. But it was a great moment for us in the show, and it made, again, a character who was kind of Boy Scout bland. It kind of explained everything he had done and was much more interesting. But it was a great reveal that we managed to keep secret. And then we also didn't get hate from Marvel for spoiling the H word.
Katie, I'd love to know when in the process of you getting hired for Paradise, they told you the twist in Paradise. Did you know before you started reading the pilot, or did you find out at the end?
So I'm assuming you mean the twist at the end of the pilot, which is
Yeah.
that this neighborhood that we have been in, spoilers, is different than where it's not located where we thought it might be. I mean, I'll say it was very clear from reading the pilot. The pilot had been written, so I had read that coming in, and it was very clear that this all is not what it seems. And so I immediately had a million questions, which is exactly what Dan was looking for in writers for this project. Just people that would dive in and poke holes in this world and see where we could stretch it to go. So that was always a big part of it from the very beginning is how do we flesh this world out? And to a huge extent, how do we give the audience delicious parcels of information while asking a new question in every episode? Especially for a streaming show, I feel like we wanted to make it a feast and not kind of make you wait until episode 10 to reveal something suddenly, which is not something I enjoy as an audience member. I kind of want to know what's going on as I'm going. So we had a good time with that.
You had a bigger reveal than that, really, with
That's what I think.
afterwards. I mean, the betrayal and the reveal of who kills who was,
Yeah.
I mean, that was super shocking. That was a much bigger emotional moment than, oh, we're where we are.
And that was, yeah, I mean, that was a good misdirect with like a
Yeah.
character who'd been hiding in plain sight sort of the
Yeah.
whole time.
I think that was a fun exploration. Those two characters have this kind of moment in the pilot where we think, okay, they're getting together. I know where this is going. And even the misdirect of what they were actually doing that night was such a fun thing for us to lay in and start to kind of go, okay, we know it's the misdirect, what you're saying. We know where we think this is going, and who would be the most shocking person to do this death, both on a like, whoa, I never saw that coming, but more importantly, on that emotional level. It's the last person you would expect, because it hurts so much that
Yeah.
it's that person.
Um,
Can I ask a couple questions? I'm sorry. These are TV questions because they're right. So I'm sorry about that, John. But both on, I found that shows I've been on, everything remains fluid. And, you never go in knowing everything at the beginning, and it's always going to be much more interesting. What if it was this person? I wondered with Cylons, was that all worked out, or did it become evident as you guys went along, as new people thought, what if it were that person? And then I also had a question for Katie in terms of, I don't know when you were on Mr. Robot, but there were clues that what was going on early, which made you go, is this real? Is this not real? Which also made it super fascinating. And I just wondered how fluid things were on those shows.
Well, I can answer for Battlestar in the sense that we didn't know who they were up until very, very late in the series when we were going, okay, well, we got the final 5 we got to figure out. We figured out 1 or 2 of them. And then we all went up to a retreat and hashed out that last season of saying who these guys are. And, Ron eventually put them all up on the board, that people we had talked about, and said, okay, go to sleep, come back. And then, because these are going to be it unless we change it tomorrow. And then it was, what do you do with that and how do you make that particularly surprising? I remember one scene where we had one guy saying, you got to watch out because Cylons are everywhere, and everybody else in the scene was a Cylon.
I remember also when Ron developed that idea that we're going to reveal the final 5, and then I think you and I might have been in Vancouver, Brad, but I remember like a teleconference, which the whole writing staff, and he was taking a vote on who do we want everybody would argue who they think the final 5 would be and why. And I feel like Brad and I lost the vote totally. We were happy afterward. And then then we have to write, Kai tells Adama he's a Cylon, and it's like, this seems like the most bogus scene to me till we found the underpinnings of it, which was the relationship. Well, that was already established. And then how do you make that organic to those 2 characters, and what makes that revealing about them, particularly Adama and Ty too. So that's just an interesting little plumbing thing about the final 5 of Battlestar Galactica.
That's fascinating. I was dying to know the answer to that question too, so I'm so glad that you asked, Jeff. I'd say, because we write all of our episodes before we're going, I'm
That's
extra in awe of all of you guys that, have written them as they're being produced and actually shot. And so you can't go back and kind of backfill. With us, we have the luxury of, oh my God, what if we did this twist? Or what if it was so and so? And then we can kind of go back and thread that through gently so that it all feels of a piece. Jeff, I completely forgot your question though.
Just
What was
Mr.
it?
Robot, because
Oh, Mr. Robot.
that's a different kind of reveal in
It really
terms
is.
of, it's not just this one aha moment, but you're starting to feel something's off, and just I thought that first season of that was really beautifully handled.
I came on much later. I was just there for the final season, which sort of really wraps up
Right.
what starts there. But I think the key of that was really that Sam Esmail had written it, originally conceived of it as a feature film. And so, as he tells it, he kind of got like 65 pages in and realized he hadn't really hit the first act yet and said, I think this might not work like as a feature. So just kind of stretched it out. So I think, the idea of the main character, Elliot, and, what might be going on with him, is seeded from that very beginning all the way through. And I know not many people watched that 4th season, but even there are some really, really crazy reveals that get into why he is the way he is, a lot more about who he was originally. And yeah, all of that stuff is really focused on the specific psychological profile of him and what's going on with him. So I think, yeah, because they had chosen to step it out so over such a long period of time, I know in that first season there was just so much space to kind of really give you that clue to clue feeling of unease like you're talking about.
And then there's to speak about the beauty of retconning, which is in Deep Space Nine, we had this character, Bashir, who is supposed to be brilliant and all of that. And we were assigned this job of, well, we have to prove that he's actually a secret agent working for the bad guys. And so what we got to do is go back to every episode that he was in, that Sadig was in, where we had dodged or done shaky things to get out of plot holes, and point at those and say, well, obviously you must have been working for the wrong side, or why would that ship have been in orbit over there to take you out? There's no reason for it to have been there. And that was a lot of fun, being able to go back and just and this was something that CSI did on a mechanical sense, which is to, what's the word? To
Recontextualize.
recontextualize evidence you already have, which is like, it means this one thing for this act, and it's scientifically valid and all of that. But when you add another part, this means something entirely different. And when you can do that with character, it's even more fun.
Yeah, that's great. I just, John, I want to ask you a question and just shift gears a little bit to talk about pitching. When you pitch something like the game, which is really dependent on all of the twists at the end, I'm just really curious to know what the pitching process was like. How much did you reveal to people to try to get it made? Were you trying to leave it secretive? Just what was that whole process like?
Okay, I only pitched the game once to an executive at Fox and had worked out everything that was finally in the movie and saved it up and like just delivered it chronological order, this, all the way through, and the reveals, and it seems like they're stealing all his money, and eventually he jumps off the roof and into a cushion, and he's at a great party. Anyway, so worked it all through, and the guy said, that could be a great movie. I'm going to pass. And I thought, I'm never going to pitch this again. I'm never going to talk about this again. I have to write this as a spec. And so my writing partner and I sat down and wrote it as a spec. And back in the day, you could get a spec in and people would read it over the weekend, and you'd know Monday if you had a deal. And if that hadn't sold, I think I might have gone to grad school and given up on Hollywood forever and taught philosophy in some minor college somewhere in the Midwest. But it sold, and then I kind of got stuck doing movies.
Was it similar for the net? Did you also write the net that way?
That was one where, okay, I was hired to write a movie about resume tampering, basically, which was something that was going on in Japan. There were companies that would actually create sort of false persona for people who were trying to get jobs. And so Erwin Winkler approached my writing partner and I about that. And we did a draft of it, and it was just terrible. But we were contractually committed to 2 drafts. So without telling anybody, I had this, I'd been running across the term identity theft. And I thought, well, how about if you just take that literally? Very simple idea. Somebody actually steals somebody's entire being and then wrote a first draft without telling them. Again, because if you warn them, it doesn't work as well. You basically want to surprise the editors, the studio people, as much as possible. And so it usually works better in an actual script. A couple of other things I did, I just, you'd sell something and then you realize it's not working when you're doing it, and then just do a completely different approach to it when you actually turn in the draft. And if it works, and people recognize it, usually, except when they don't.
How about for the TV writers? What's your strategy for pitching your boss? I know you guys talked about how Ron Moore likes to be surprised. How do you try to balance pitching surprises to a boss, to a showrunner?
Here's what my writing staff would do to me. And they go, the other day you said something we thought was a really great idea. And so we've been working on that, and we think it's this. And so basically they lie and flatter so that I think that it's my idea, and then they pitch it. And then, I go, well, that's, you're right. That's a great idea. So for all you guys on writing staffs, a good thing to do is just to make it feel like the boss had the idea. No, look, pitching is an art, right? I mean, we had writers who were terrific in the room and could pitch the turn, and you were like, holy shit. And other writers who weren't as good at that, and so usually they let somebody else pitch it. But you want to feel the excitement in the room, because you're selling it, to your, at least on the shows I've been on X-Files, we'd go off and write on our own. We'd go in, we'd pitch to Chris and the other EPs, and they really didn't know much until we started pitching off the board. And And you'd get to the end of Act 1. If they didn't like it, they'd send you away and they wouldn't even hear Acts 2, 3, or 4. You just had to go and start again. And so, I mean, finding a way to pitch it and hide it. There was a moment on X-Files where I did one. The devil was the bad guy. There was a snake handling church, and I was pitching it to Frank Spotnitz, who was the EP. And at a certain point, he goes, and then Mulder figures out. I said, "No, it's the devil. The devil's going to win." And I kept pushing it off because Mulder's smart, but he ended up nearly dying, and Scully had to save him. But you're pitching it, and you want them to get invested, but hopefully also surprise them. So
I act out the pitches. I just do the same. I do the characters, and I remember on CSI, we had one where Lawrence Fishburne's at a trial for this psychopathic killer, and the psychopathic killer's defense is there's a gene called the psychopathic gene, and if you have that, you have high percentage that you're a psychopath. And so the killer's defense was, I have this gene, therefore who's really the victim? I'm the victim. And he's like winning. And Lawrence Fishburne gets up and is testifying, and they're cross-examining him. And the end, he says, well, I have the same gene, and I've never killed anyone. And I acted it out with great panache. And Carol Mendelsohn was like, oh, that's fantastic. So it's just like, I think the thing is, you just, like, for me, I just throw everything I've got in. Even if I think I'm sweating and I think it's gonna fail and it's sounding stupid, I just throw it in, and it's showbiz, and so I put on a show. And I believe it while I'm pitching it, and that's my technique.
I'll say one
Go ahead.
sorry, please,
No,
Jeff.
please go ahead.
I was just going to say one thing that I think is really different in pitching something in a room versus pitching something to executives is you're pitching to another writer. And so all of our writer brains are always going while you're hearing the pitch, like you're saying, like, and then Mulder does it. The showrunner you're pitching to is getting 4 steps ahead. And so I think sometimes on our show, it can be very successful that way, where you're laying the breadcrumbs and it's almost like you're letting the showrunner finish the sentence and get to the same conclusion. It's like building a bridge that way. So then you're all on the same page, everything's included, but the delightful surprise is still there together.
Yeah. The other thing is different now. In the old days, you could go in and you could pitch, and they go, "Know what happened?" And you go, "You have to pay me for that because there's so much free work." But honestly, they now expect you to have all 8 or all 12 episodes completely broken, which is what a writer's room is for. And we could hide behind, well, you'd write basically a TV guide synopsis so that they could see there were more than one story. But, any writer would be able to come up with, we were doing, 22 or whatever, but it's gotten really difficult because they really want you to break all 8 or 12 episodes before they even buy the episode. It's like, well, it's going to be much more better later. So I just tell people, lie, just make it up. And then when you get in the room, go do it. Find the real story. The format's a book of lies. It's what you're hired to do to make them believe that you know what you're doing. And then later you can go fix it. Don't let that get in the way.
David, I know that when we talked to you about this panel, you mentioned that you don't always like twists for twist's sake, and I was just wondering if you could expand on that a little bit.
Well, it is CSI. We ran into it a lot. There were a lot of writers who write from an external place. They're just looking for the twists. That's all they're looking for, and it isn't motivated by character or reality, or it's just a sensational hairpin turn that will surprise the audience. And sometimes I think what my resistance is to the unearned twists, the twists that don't come out of character. And so I would see that on that show, but I see it in films and other TV shows. And the minute I feel an unmotivated twist where I feel like I'm being manipulated, that the writers or writers did it to just have, because they felt they needed a twist here, I drop out of the show and I lose interest. And I don't like it, and I feel it needs to come from an internal place. And more twists don't make it better. The twists that we have been talking to tonight, that come out of characters, come out of story, the earned twists, but yet you've hid it from the audience. But when the twist comes, the audience goes, "Oh my God, why didn't I see that? Oh my God, of course." Oh my, so I think that, people, there's a culture, it's driven by the studios and producers, I think, a lot. The addiction to twists, because you feel safe and everybody knows there's supposed to be twists. And so there is a tendency to want to just pile them on. And, oh, it's too linear is a thing that you hear all the time now, which is true. And it's a concern, but sometimes linear is great. Martin, to quote Psycho, which has an incredible amount of great compounded twists, all of them organic. But like Martin Balsam's coming up the stairs, he's going to get killed. Like, is he? If you were addicted to the twist for twist sake, you go, well, he doesn't get killed, but we think he's going to get killed. But then something else. But there's such suspense waiting for that moment that is going to happen, and when it does happen, there's great value in that. So it's not linear is not always bad. Linear is not something to be avoided at all costs. It has its place and it has its value. And so I just at times get frustrated by the addictive need for twists that as I say, is driven by the marketplace, not by writers, I don't think. But then sometimes writers fall into the trap of feeling that's what we need to deliver so that we, can earn a living, which I'm not immune to that pressure, of course, but.
Piggybacking on that, I was rewatching the Swedish version of Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. And there's a great sequence at the end, or towards the end, where you've got Lisbeth and Mikhail, and it's linear, but you're intercutting. And you get all the tension and the reveals from the intercut. So on one hand, he's going to sneak into some Nazi guy's house to look for clues, and she goes off to investigate stuff in old police files. And so you're intercutting between the two of them, and suddenly the Nazi comes home and you think, oh my God, he's going to kill Mikhail, but a son comes along and doesn't, and you relax, he's saved. And so your adrenaline goes down and you relax, and the son is now walking Mikhail back and you feel safe for him. And then in the other line, Elizabeth just finds this information, and everything you're getting is, oh, the son's the bad guy. The son is the real bad guy. And so the audience is getting the clue right there. Meanwhile, our other protagonist is relaxed, and you feel he thought he was safe, and now you're feeling all that tension. And so it's working linearly, but the way the reveal is happening is by intercutting between the two stories. And I found it really, really compelling.
Right.
We did a good way to create conflict and tension.
Great. So where in the writing process do you tend to like to find your twists? Do you feel like you like to go in sort of thinking, I have an idea for where the story is going to turn, and we need to figure out how it's going to get supported? Or are you always surprised by when a twist comes up? What is the writing process like for you?
For me, it starts at the twist often, and then the rest of the movie is about inevitability and getting there and playing with the various cognitive biases that people have to make them think that they know what's going on when they really don't. Having it ultimately all add up in a good way, but the twist comes very often in a lot of the stuff I've written at the very outset, at the core of the idea. And it's, when it works, it justifies everything. I mean, in Terminator 3, the twist in the movie is ultimately that the world ends, and everything is about, like you thought, preventing that from happening. That movie would be absolutely worthless without that ending. And, when a twist is necessary and it makes the whole rest of everything you've been watching suddenly have a reason to exist. That's the best kind for me. And yeah, I mean, coming up with them late in the day and just sticking them in is just crap writing. I mean, the right way to do it is have that be at the center of it and help be what it's all about. You know, a movie has to always be pretty much about one thing, ultimately. And when it's a good twist, that can be what it's about, finally. If that makes any sense.
Mhm.
I mean, to Katie's point on Blacklist, on most procedural shows, that if it's teaser in 4 or 5 acts, that either second act or third act out is almost always either a turn or a reset. Almost always. You're investigating. You know, your act 1 out, you find an arm in a dumpster. And the next act, you find out, oh, there's a leg in the dumpster. And then the end of the turn is middle of, well, they're 2 different bodies or something. Or it's a way to, or everything we knew was wrong and the person we thought was the bad guy. And so I find that mid-act point, at least in procedural stuff, is frequently where you set that, either we'd always look for a reset or a turn right there so that you could figure out what to do for the next 2 acts. At some point we realized in a murder mystery, you need at least 5. The person who's killed has to be a terrible person because you need at least 5 people who are suspects. I mean, it's crazy, but they need to have, like, if it's less than that, the audience is going to be way ahead of you. So you need to figure out ways to hide the ball.
Yeah, that's the recontextualization that we were talking about earlier. The sort of seeing everything from that you just saw from a different perspective.
Yeah. I did a show called Harper's Island, which was a murder mystery on a destination wedding. And basically 25 people show up and every week somebody would get killed. And it's like, who's the killer? And so we had to hide that. And one good way to hide it is to, you know, bring up the suspect early, then let them go. I mean, you CSI guys know that. I mean, that's, you know, it's like you have to shine a light bulb on the killer, because if it's not, then you're going to go, well, why aren't we looking at Katie? Because she looks suspicious, you know? But that was fun to try. And we fooled a lot of people, just not my sister-in-law, who from the pilot said, it's him. And every week I'd go, you still think it's him? And she said, it's him. And she was right.
We definitely use that same logic on Paradise. It was really important to us that the answer to the murder mystery was in that first episode, and we just tried our darndest to bury that ball as quickly and as effectively as possible, which in our case involved a lot of prosthetics, and it became a vector for us to tell a story about why this place was made and kind of the underbelly of it. And that all came through this twist that we wanted to have happen, which was a fun thing to explore.
John, I like what you said about challenging the audience's preconceptions and their own prejudices that they may not even know what they have. What we wrote a CSI was murder at a science fiction convention. And so the immediate impulse on the many staff people who most had not been on science fiction shows was, it's a fan did it. And everybody's pitching the various crazy fans. And Brad and I didn't want to do that because we respected having worked in the genre and met the fans and knowing they're too easily caricatured and that there's a lot more to them than people think. So we made it a film professor who was who believed in semiotics, because I had a thing against semiotics. Because my daughter, I had to pay for a bunch of semiotics classes for my daughter in film school. So we made the killer semiotics professor. But it was then really easy to populate all these fans that people would immediately, and have them arguing over which fans. And the semiotics professor is there from the beginning. But you don't look at her because she's not exotic. The other characters are so out there that you're immediately, oh, it has to be a crazy fan.
Right.
So, and that
Great
worked.
construction. Yeah.
No, I mean, twists always play on audience prejudice of one sort or another.
Yeah.
I mean, they basically, it's like the blind spots, the things they they normally assume that you're finally playing on. With any luck, you're sort of trying to wake them up a little bit and be subversive and show, hey, look, reality isn't necessarily what you assume it to be. That's, at least part of the goal of what a twist should, a good one, do.
Yeah.
Is there any twist that you've written either in something that did get made, or maybe even something that's unfortunately stayed in the drafts folder? Any twist that you've come up with and written that you're particularly proud of?
Me or
Anyone, but yeah, you can start, John, if you have something that comes to mind.
I wrote a movie which I sold as a spec back in the 90s when things like specs still sold. That was essentially trying to be the last time travel movie. Time travel movies drive me insane because they're the cheapest fucking twists, in the world. And it's your father is actually your daughter, is actually your son, is actually your grandfather. I mean, all the stupid twists. So I wrote a movie that was called Remote Control, about a remote control that can go back and forward and control reality. And I tried to pile in every cliche possible from a time travel movie, every paradox I could come up with, and wound up with a final scene that had 60 different versions of a character from different ages of his life in one room, all sort of hiding from each other. That just tried to, like, a reductio ad absurdum of the entire genre. Because honestly, time travel movies, I've had to write a bunch of them, and I've always kind of hated them. Because that's an example of like cheap twist generation, is time travel. So anyway, that's one. It never got made, sadly. But it paid the rent for about a year.
Anyone else? It can be something that was produced too. Yeah, not necessarily. I'm interested either way.
I mean, we
We're
had,
people, we're writers.
I mean, as I think about twists, like usually Brad and I develop them from we don't start with a twist. So we're opposite of you, John, but in some ways, it's an opposite technique that gets to a common, aesthetic, choice, which is to make it organic and make it come from the characters. But I remember on Battlestar Galactica, Ron Moore felt early on that Katie Sackhoff's character, Starbuck, was a kind of guardian angel that was going to eventually take the survivors of the apocalypse on Caprica and guide them to the lost colony of man on a planet called Earth. So he was looking for ways to start laying the breadcrumbs for that. And we didn't have the option of planning it all ahead of time. We were shooting 22 episodes a year, and we had to write them as we went. And so Ron was looking for those opportunities. And so we wrote a scene in the second season, Valley of Darkness, where Katie Sackhoff's character goes back to her home planet, goes to her apartment. And Ron wrote it just as a slice of life. Here's what it's like to hang out in your apartment after a nuclear apocalypse has happened. She's there with Hilo, and they walk in, and this was just created by Ron. Maybe he subconsciously had where this was going to go, but there's a big painting of a mandala like on a canvas, and Katie Sackhoff actually painted part of it anyway. And they walk in, and Hilo, the character she's with, goes, "Did you do that?" She goes, "Yeah." And then she goes and turns on stereo and music starts playing. He goes, "Who's that?" "That's my father. It's a symphony." And then they just sit and it's just life at the end of the world. And that's it. It was a slice of life. So then we get to this a later season 3, I think it was, where they're on this planet where they find an old temple left by the lost tribe of man. And it's a temple to the 5 Cylons. And Ron said to Brad and I'd like something to be on the temple. Like maybe Starbuck comes in and there's all this strange writing and nobody can read it. She comes in and she can read it. And no one else can. They're like, "How can you read that?" And this is how we start to say she's a guardian angel. And so Brad and we were told to go off and write that, but Ron never means write exactly what I told you to do. He's pointing the way. And we walked all around the universe a lot, and we were like, I don't want to do the writing where she could read it and no one else can read it. It just sounds like hokey. And I'm not running Ron Moore down here because he's just giving us a placeholder. And it was up to us to find it. So what we would do is go back and watch early episodes of the show and try to figure out where are some clues of what could be on this temple. And we saw that we went back to that scene that he wrote. There was a slice of life. Now, maybe subconsciously he already had a sense that this was going to mean something. I could certainly believe that of him. And so we go, what if this mandala, this painting, what if that's on the wall, of the temple? It's on the pillars. And so we put it in, and Ron loved it. So then, okay, now she saw the mandala. What does that fucking mean? We have no idea what it means. And then so then comes, I'm up on the set and we're shooting an episode. Katie Sackhoff comes over and he goes, so what, why was that mandala on the temple? I'm like, well, we're still working on that. We didn't, well, I thought, what if after I saw that, it's a 5,000-year-old temple, it's got my mandala. What if it made me think about something in my childhood that I recontextualized now? Because now that I know I have this weird cosmic destiny tied to an ancient temple. And so we went back and we started working on that as a staff. And we started developing, what if she's going around a planet and she starts to see the mandala in the clouds and she's drawn into it. She goes into it and there's a lightning storm and she starts to have flashbacks with her mother who told her years ago about her cosmic destiny, but she'd never put much credence in it. And then we pitched that to Ron and we said, but she pulls out just in time, of course. And she's okay, but she wonders what the mandala meant. And Ron goes, why doesn't she just blow up and die? So he then took it one step further than we took it. And these become twists out of character, but it came out of what we laid before. So we found the twist in what we'd already established versus thinking, starting there. So it's just a different way to skin the cat, I think. But
very cool. I'm also a huge Battlestar fan, so this is all like I love hearing all about this. And does anyone else have one that they want to share that they're proud of? All right, we can also take questions from the audience if everybody's ready. So this is a question from someone in the audience. If you're pitching a TV show to executives with a major twist at the end of the pilot, one that completely retextualizes everything in the episode, when do you reveal that twist? For example, if you had to pitch the pilot episode of This Is Us, where you find out at the end that they're all part of the same family.
I'll go ahead and speak on that as the person who works with Dan Fogelman currently. I think there are two twists at the end of that episode. One is that one of the storylines we've been seeing is not actually in the present day. It's actually back in time in the 70s. So that twist is told in this very really subtle way where we suddenly see someone is smoking in a hospital. I think usually, when you're pitching a TV show, you're kind of pitching the story of the pilot. So it would take place, those pitches would land as they would land, as a viewer, you're watching it. And here comes the moment when we realize, oh my God, Jack is actually in the past. And those three babies that we've been seeing, this birth story is actually these three people that we've met this whole time. This is the story of a family in two timelines. And this is the concept of the show going forward.
Yeah, I mean, Modern Family did that really well too, right? You think you're following these different families, and I think, that would be when you follow these three families, and then the fact that they all come together. I mean, I remember watching that going, I should have seen that coming. I should have seen that coming,
Yeah.
but I didn't. And it was, I found it terrific. So I would assume you'd want to give the exec that moment. If you can give the exec the moment, give them enough where they feel smart so that you either just see it coming right before, or you can do that so they don't go, huh? But go, oh my God, because that's where the money is, and that is that moment.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like it's interesting because we've been talking, I think, a lot of high concept twists and sort of bigger things, and This Is Us, and then definitely Modern Family. Yeah, those are just sort of very simple twists about who are these people, and what are their relationships to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, here's our second audience question. Can you talk more about earning the twist? They quoted what the audience is expecting and how can we turn that on its head, but not just do it out of nowhere, end quote. Do you sometimes work backwards from what would be the most surprising and then seed in the necessary character elements and plot clues and breadcrumbs to earn it? So yeah, I think they just wanted more of an expansion on what we were talking about of how do you make it surprising but also inevitable at the same time.
I mean, that's always the task in all narrative fiction, really, is to feel inevitability, necessity, at the same time as you also serve as possibility. Um, as you think about it and as you work on it and as it becomes more real instead of just a skeleton, and sometimes it like throws you curves where you suddenly have to throw out the twist, which is the reason for the thing to exist in the first place. I mean, you get when it's good, you get to the point of the story talks to you, right? And it's like it's maieutic. It's you're sort of a midwifery, really, for the story, and it's telling you what works and what doesn't. I'm not sure I'm answering the question, but essentially that you can't force it after a certain point. If it feels like it's forced, you got to get rid of it and have it feel organic, have it feel real and alive. I mean, that's the whole thing, is to keep it, seeming like reality while also heightening reality.
This
But
this this kind of came up when we were doing one of the earlier episodes of Battlestar, and again, it's about what people expect to have coming, and a lot of comedy, of course, is twisting that. But we were doing a scene where Starbuck comes in and tells Adama that she is responsible for passing his son when his son was an incompetent pilot, and his incompetence and the fact that she felt sorry for him and passed him got him killed. And so we were kind of going from the original feeling of television is like, well, Adama's the big father guy, and he's going to, he's going to suck it up and realize that she's a good person, and that, eventually he's going to suck up the pain and, say, okay, go ahead. And that's where we were at the time. And one of the most liberating moments of our television career is when Ron said, no, what he says is get out of here while you can still walk. And okay, that is a twist on what I was expecting my television characters to do, which is this guy's got so angry he was ready to kill her. And that was really liberating, but that all came out of who he was.
That feels like it plays on what we were talking about earlier about the audience's preconceptions and their blind spots, and where you think, well, this is my TV show where all of the characters like each other, and I can expect that this character who's always acted as a father figure will continue to, and then you sort of reached in and know, but like, what is the real version of that? What is the real person?
And we laid it on thick in the beginning by how much he was like a surrogate father all through the episode, and adoring her and telling her how great. And so all the expectation is he's going to talk her down and go, you don't have to feel that bad. It wasn't your fault. You loved, and he almost just turns because his revelation that she got his son killed, and he becomes the opposite. And because he feels betrayed by her, and she's not who he thought she was. And so suddenly, and then she never thought he would go there. And so that was a powerful twist.
A great
Now,
moment.
a lot more concept and Ron Moore got us to do it, and that's when we really started to learn,
Mhm.
That was a very
And
learned
it's
moment.
when we talk about it being inevitable, it's because Adama is a human being. And that's what, he wasn't a television character to us at that point. It's like, you killed my son. What do you expect?
All right, I have another question from the audience, and we are being recorded, so this may modulate your answers a little bit. But what is an example of a bad twist that you've seen?
I have an answer to this that is so judicious. I can tell you about a twist we decided not to do in our writer's room because we did not like it. Um, it's for our season 2 that's coming out, and so I'm not going to get into super details, but basically, a lot of these twists that we're talking about, especially for television, you are taking a character we think we know is one way, and then we're revealing some other fact about them. And we thought about doing that with sort of kind of one of the more bland characters that we just hadn't really fleshed out as much in our show, and revealing in this huge twist that this person had this massive ulterior motive and was connected to another character, and we're learning that character's backstory and all of this stuff. And it was going to be this huge bombshell moment at the end of an episode. And then we started looking at the next episodes and we said, well, what does that do for us? Like that, given that twist, given these revelations about this character, these are the storylines that I want to see. These are the interactions. That's what I want to see ripple out through this, through the rest of our journey. And we kind of said, well, that's not really what we want to do. That's not the character journey that we have for this other character in this episode. That's not what's going on with that's gonna take over everything else that we have planned that we want to see. And so we decided actually that was just like a gotcha placeholder idea that is not connected to our characters and how they relate to each other or the world that we're building here. So we ultimately decided we're not going to do that at all. And yeah, bad twist averted.
It's a great way to think about it in terms of, does your twist generate story? Does it generate story or does it kill story? How does this ripple out? And if it may be this awesome moment, but after that, there's nothing else to do. So it's a good way to think of it.
My quarrel with CSI often was they would have be addicted to a twist at the end of every act. And then too often in CSI, the solution to any interpersonal problem was to kill the other person. Yeah. And often you look at the characters, you're like, why would they ever do that? And it becomes completely unbelievable. You're not believing it. So then the twist has no power because it's false. So that's when I talk about twist addiction. I often think of CSI. There were many great CSI episodes, but there were many that failed for that, in my point of view, for that reason.
Can I be really controversial?
Yes.
The twist that I really hated was The Sixth Sense. And I know that's like held up as one of the great twists in all movie history. Everybody loves it. I saw that movie when it first opened and I didn't know anything about it with my wife. And the moment that the Bruce Willis character gets shot, and then it cuts to like 3 years later or whatever, it's like, oh, he's dead. How annoying the rest of this movie was. And then I'm sitting through this tedium of, now that's okay because I spend a lot of my time writing movies that I saw. Well, you don't cut away when you shoot a character like that. You don't just suddenly jump to the future because obviously now they're a dead person. Anyway, people love that movie. I'm so glad they loved it. It drove me completely nuts. I thought that was like the crappiest twist of all time.
How did you feel about Jacob's Ladder?
I love Jacob's Ladder. I mean, it's like Incident at Owl Creek Bridge. I love things where at the end you find out they're dead the whole time. That's always nice.
Angel Heart's another one like that, I think.
Angel Heart. Yeah. Death I
Owl
like.
Creek
Time travel I
Bridge
hate.
lays the trail, and it's been,
Yeah.
many times. And I think it's a great paradigm, and it can be profoundly powerful. And I don't think it's like no one should ever, take inspiration from it, but it is sometimes too often imitated. For me, when I'm watching a movie or a TV show with like frequently it's with my wife, if I can predict one plot twist, that's not good. If I can predict the next thing if I can predict the next three things that are gonna happen, I'm done. But even though my perspective usually is often more from character, but so because if it's being predictable, then there's something not organic about it. There's something not real about it that you're seeing the artifice. So yeah, that's bad if you I like success, but I'm not as attuned to perhaps that I just didn't pick up on it. But if I did, yeah, well, the rest of the movie's useless because now you're left for an hour of just watching it play out, which is not a good thing.
Well, it wasn't written for me, so that's okay.
Yeah.
All right, next question from the audience. I often learn from my own dumbass mistakes because they're so mortifying. I'd love to hear about what you've learned from unsuccessful twists you failed to pull off, maybe only in drafts. I feel like this gets to kind of what you were saying, Katie, about when the twist that you sort of realized wasn't serving the story. But yeah, hard won lessons along the way. Maybe what are some lessons you've had to earn?
I think silence means there's too many to count, not so much that we don't have any. At least for me.
Yeah, and trying not to talk too much.
No, please.
Well, one of the first things Ira said to us when we were going to work at Star Trek, it was our very first job, was that, and I was going, oh, we want to learn how to do it. And he said, no, basically you're going to learn how we make mistakes. And that's pretty much what sometimes when we're interviewed and so on, that they ask, where do you get all your really good ideas? And it comes from, no, actually, we have bunches and bunches of bad ideas that we work on. And another artist had once said to me, and this was an actual artist, said that when he went to art school at first, he said the instructor gave him a notebook, a book that you draw in. He said, you have 10,000 terrible drawings and you start now.
I've failed many times. And I don't remember them either. I don't care to remember them, but it's usually like I'm working exterior. I'm trying to deliver something either I think the showrunner wants or the network wants, and it's not coming from me. And so I'm writing something, and I'm trying to make myself believe it works, and I might even think it works when I turn it in, but deep down I know it doesn't work, and I failed, and it's usually to me I'm being inauthentic.
David just landed on something that I found really important as well in our career, which is when we had the last, we were brought on Star Trek and said we can go 10 weeks, and Ira gave us one last script to do because we weren't cutting it the way they wanted it. And they said, go ahead and ask us. All the producers were wonderful about come in and ask us how it's going. And we decided, the only thing that we really have going forward is not to be able to ask them, but to work with each other. And if we failed on it, then we failed. We just weren't good enough, or we weren't their sensibilities. But that was what David is saying is if you're betraying yourself and your sensibility, you better get an awful lot of money for it because you won't be able to do it for very long. Because really the only thing you have to go back to is your own, what you believe in and what you believe is going to work. And every time we didn't do that, it failed.
Well, the worst feeling is when you're trying to kick dirt over a problem that you know is there and trying to hide it and conceal it, when really what you need to do is throw it out. Which is finally less painful than just, trying to hide how it sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I took a class with Bill Prady when I was at USC, and one of his big things that he talked about was if you're having a problem on page 30, the real problem is on page 15.
Yeah. Something came to mind that I learned the hard way. I was on Angel, which was the Buffy spinoff. And those shows are clever and funny and snarky, but they're also deeply emotional. And I wrote an episode that I had to write faster than I'd ever written. But I thought it was like, hey, that's kind of funny. That's kind of funny. And I got excoriated because it was funny and not emotional. I'd gone for cheap jokes. I'd not gone for what was real in the moment. And it was a good lesson that funny is good, funny is great, but it has to come out of genuine emotion. And I was taking
That's
shortcuts
good.
by trying to be snarky and funny when really there was a lot of emotion to be explored. And so every time I write something now, I ask myself if I'm just, being a jackass or if there's something really there.
The tricky thing is you can fool yourself. Like I'm really good at lying to myself, and concealing, and thinking that it works, because I want it to work. And because I didn't get enough love as a child. So that's why I'm doing this to begin with. So, I'm trying to please whoever I am turning this into, the draft into. So that's the tricky part, is really trying to catch yourself, stop yourself from lying to yourself and being honest with yourself about whether it's working or not. And that's still tricky today.
You guys do that for each other?
Yes.
Absolutely. And we don't often like it.
No, we used to get in huge, horrible fights because we didn't like it. And we'd come out of our office and the whole hall, all the writers would be out in the hallway like, wow, that was passionate. But now I think we trust each other enough now that if Brad says it's not working, I have to believe him. I can't just say, no, I'm right. Brad's saving me from me. So.
The other thing is that we do, and this is, I think, is important, we're together because we both like each other's writing, and we don't want to let the other person forget that, in the fact that, okay, if this is not working, you're not a worthless human being. It just means I got a problem with this one spot.
That's all making me think of, I'm much earlier in my career than all of these incredible writers on this panel with me. And something that I especially have struggled with as a young writer and am trying to get better at is over cluttering an idea. And I think a lot of that does come from pleasing, not trusting myself, not being able to listen to myself. And as John said, like often, a feature film can only be about one thing. An episode of television can only be about one thing, and especially connected to creating a twist. If you are putting twist on twist on twist on twist, you're cluttering from what the thing it is that it needs to be. And so learning to hone and listen to your own instincts and find what that thing is and trust that all that other cool stuff you came up with, you can either come up with way more of it later or you can reuse it again later. But this needs to be just one thing, is something that's I think really valuable.
Great. Well, it's 8:30. This has been such an incredible discussion. I really learned a lot. I'm really excited to work on the thing I'm working on with all of these answers swirling in my head. I hope you feel this way. I hope our audience also feels this way. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any final thoughts on twists they weren't able to get out?
Well, my actual final thing I wanted to say, I was really pleased that you got us together, and I'm really happy to have met the people on the panel, even if it's only by Zoom.
Yeah, me too.
Same
Really,
here. This has been a pleasure.